I, on the other hand, was like a shadow, barely noticed. It wasn't just in what they said, but in everything they did. Every choice, every action showed where their priorities lay. Lily was showered with love, attention, and praise. Every small accomplishment of hers was treated like a monumental achievement. I still recall how, when she took her first steps, they called the entire extended family to celebrate. I don't even remember my own first steps because nobody recorded them or made a fuss. That pattern of neglect toward me persisted throughout my life. The house never felt like my home. My room, a tiny, cramped space in a far corner, felt more like a forgotten storage closet. It had a narrow bed, a rickety dresser, and a leaning shelf. I used to joke privately that they put me there because they wanted to forget I existed. Meanwhile, Lily's room was a masterpiece, like something out of a magazine. It had a canopy bed with plush pink bedding, fairy lights strung delicately across the walls, and shelves filled with dolls and stuffed animals. Her room was carefully designed to make her feel special and loved. Mine, in contrast, had peeling beige paint, and even the posters I tried to hang wouldn't stick. After a while, I stopped trying to make it look nice. It seemed pointless to pretend. The differences extended to everything: clothes, toys, birthdays. Lily always got brand new, stylish outfits, complete with matching accessories. Her closet was overflowing with clothes. I, however, wore hand-me-downs from cousins, friends, and even neighbors. I remember wearing clothes that didn't fit properly and shoes that were falling apart, as though I should be grateful for whatever scraps I got. Birthdays were especially hard. They'd throw lavish parties for Lily, complete with decorations, bounce houses, and magicians. For my birthdays, it was usually a last-minute effort, maybe a store-bought cake with a single candle. No friends, no decorations, no celebration. It felt like just another day. Even my achievements were overlooked. I worked hard in school, staying up late to study and earning good grades. Once, I won a science fair award. I came home, holding the certificate proudly, thinking, maybe this will finally make them see me. But when I showed them, they barely reacted. My dad mumbled, "Good job, keep it up," without even glancing away from his phone. My mom gave a distant smile, the kind you offer when you're not really paying attention. Yet, when Lily aced a test, they celebrated like it was the biggest event of the year. They'd take her out to dinner, call friends to brag, and shower her with praise. My accomplishments, no matter how significant, were met with indifference. It wouldn't have mattered if I were a straight A student or a prodigy. I wasn't what they wanted. When I was about 12, I finally worked up the courage to ask why things were the way they were. I asked my mom why Lily was treated so differently, why she seemed to get everything while I was left with nothing. She gave me a tired look, as though my question itself was exhausting. "Look," she said, "we're doing the best we can. Lily needs things that you don't. She's special." It wasn't just the words, but the tone, the casual dismissal. She didn't try to deny that Lily was their favorite or even pretend to care about my feelings. She said it as if it were the simplest truth in the world, something I should have always understood. That was the moment I gave up. I realized then that nothing I did, no matter how hard I worked or what I achieved, would ever change their perception of me. They had decided long ago that Lily was their prized child, the one they wanted and loved, while I was just the unwanted extra, barely tolerable. I began withdrawing more and more, retreating into the solitude of my small room and building my own little world. I spent hours absorbed in books, video games, and anything that helped me escape my reality. Though my room was cramped and modest, it became my sanctuary, the one place where I could be alone, away from their constant adoration of Lily and the feeling of being an outsider in my own family. Over time, I stopped seeking their approval. I focused entirely on my studies, not to impress them, but because it was the only thing I had control over. It became my way of proving my worth to myself. I excelled academically, earning top grades, winning awards, and securing scholarships. But I didn't share any of it with them. I knew their reaction would be indifferent, so I saved myself the disappointment by keeping it all to myself. It was easier that way. Easier to let them live in their little bubble where Lily was the center of the universe, and I was nothing more than a shadow. Looking back, I can see how those experiences shaped me. They forced me to depend on myself, to find my value without their validation. It taught me to be self-reliant and to carve out my own path. It wasn't easy, but it made me stronger. It showed me that I didn't need them to build a life for myself, even if they never acknowledged me. I don't know if they ever realized how much harm they caused, if they were aware of the way their neglect chipped away at me until I felt like an empty shell of who I could have been. Maybe they noticed, but didn't care. Or maybe they were too wrapped up in their own lives to even see me. Either way, it doesn't matter now. I stopped needing them a long time ago. I've learned to be content on my own, to find strength in solitude and pride in my accomplishments. They can keep their perfect Lily, their golden child. I've found my own way, separate from the family that never wanted me. Perhaps they thought they were breaking me, pushing me down until I faded entirely. But all they really did was make me more determined, more resolved to prove that I didn't need them. They may have given me life, but they didn't give me purpose. That's something I found for myself in quiet moments, in the shadows, and in the spaces they ignored. In a strange way, I'm thankful for it. The isolation, the neglect, the rejection. It all taught me that I didn't need their approval to survive. It made me stronger, more resilient, and ready to face anything. Now, as I reflect on those years, I know I'm better off without them. I don't need their attention or love. I never did. The only family member who ever truly cared about me was my grandfather. In a world where I was mostly invisible, he was the one person who saw me for who I was. He wasn't a man of many words, but his quiet warmth made me feel safe. Something I rarely experienced in that house. He would take me fishing on weekends or to the park, where we'd sit in companionable silence, and for a while, the rest of the world disappeared. He was the only one who ever asked about my day or cared about the little things. He taught me how to ride a bike, tie a fishing knot, and build a birdhouse. Those small moments became my lifeline, something to hold on to when I felt completely alone. One day, when I was around 10, he took me to his favorite fishing spot by the lake. We sat there with our poles, and he turned to me with a gentle smile. "You're a good kid," he said, patting my shoulder. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. You've got a big heart, and that's something no one can take away." His words stayed with me in a way I don't think he ever realized. In a home where I felt like an intruder, he made me feel like I belonged, even if only for a few stolen moments. He never treated me as a burden or an afterthought. To him, I was enough. Sometimes, he'd slip me $1 or two with a wink and tell me to buy myself something nice. It was such a small gesture, but to me, it meant the world. He was the only person who made me feel special. Then, everything changed when he got sick. I was about 13 when his health started to decline, and it felt like watching my last anchor slip away. The man who had once been so strong and steady, the one who carried me on his shoulders and taught me how to skip stones, became a frail shadow of himself. Each hospital visit took away a piece of the person I had known. And when he passed away, I felt as though I'd lost the one important part of my family. The funeral felt like a blur. My parents were there, of course, but they seemed to be going through the motions. They stood by the casket with dry eyes, offering polite words of sympathy to people they hardly knew. Lily, as always, was the focus of attention. People crowded around her, asking if she was okay, as though she had been the one who spent all those years with him. I stood there, numb and alone, watching them pretend to care. They quickly moved on, as if nothing had happened. There were no whispered words of comfort, no gentle reminders that everything would be all right. I was left to mourn in isolation, forced to deal with the loss of the only person who had truly understood me. My parents barely acknowledged it. They were too busy worrying about Lily, as usual. I overheard them discussing how she was struggling, how close she had been to him. It felt like a slap in the face, a stark reminder that no matter what I felt or had lost, it didn't matter. They only had room for Lily. I spent more and more time alone in my room after that, withdrawing from everyone else in the house. Despite its small and neglected state, my room became my sanctuary, the one place where I could be with my thoughts, where I could remember my grandfather without anyone interrupting. I would sit there for hours, replaying our shared moments, clinging to every piece of him I could hold on to. But even that small comfort was taken away. Lily got pregnant at 16, and my parents decided that the only way to make room for her growing family was to take over my room. I'll never forget how they told me. They didn't ask or discuss it with me. One day, my mom just walked in and told me to pack my things because they needed the space for Lily. Her tone was blunt, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "She'll need all the space she can get with the baby," she said. I was stunned, unable to process what she was saying. "But where am I supposed to go?" I asked. She sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. "We've set up the basement for you. It'll be fine. You don't need much space anyway," she replied. And that was it. No discussion, no room for negotiation. I was exiled from the only space I had ever called my own, sent to the cold, dark basement while Lily moved into my room, claiming everything that had once been mine. They didn't even help me move my belongings. I had to carry my bed, my dresser, my books, and whatever else I could manage down the narrow stairs to the basement, which they had hastily prepared for me. The basement was a joke. It was cold and damp, with exposed pipes and old boxes cluttering the walls. They threw a worn-out mattress on the floor and added a rickety table and a chair that looked like it had been salvaged from a dumpster. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, flickering on and off, unsure whether it wanted to stay on or leave me in complete darkness. And they expected me to live there, to call it home, as if it could possibly compare to the comfort Lily had upstairs. The worst part was the dampness. I could feel it in the air, a cold, clingy moisture that seeped into my bones, making it impossible to ever feel warm. I would wake up in the middle of the night, shivering, pulling the thin blanket tighter around me. But it was never enough. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house above, muffled laughter, footsteps, the occasional burst of music. They were up there, living their lives, while I was down here, forgotten and alone. The electricity was unreliable, too. Some nights, the light would flicker and then go out, plunging me into complete darkness. I'd sit there, waiting for it to come back on, feeling the walls close in around me. I knew they didn't care if the lights stayed off, or if the basement flooded, or if I disappeared altogether. They wouldn't notice. They had Lily, and that was all that mattered. I tried to make the best of it, to transform the basement into a space that felt somewhat like mine. I put up a few posters, brought down some books, and arranged the furniture to make it feel less like a prison cell. But no matter what I did, it was still the basement, still the place they had put me, because there was no room for me in their lives. My grandfather would have never let this happen. He would have fought for me, told them to find another solution, made them understand that I was worth more than a cold, damp corner of the basement. But he was gone, and no one was left to stand up for me. No one to tell them that I mattered. So I stayed there, night after night, in the dark, damp basement, clinging to the memories of the only person who had ever truly cared. I would think of him, remember the things he said, the way he made me feel like I was important. And I held on to those memories, even as the rest of the world turned its back on me. They could take my room, my comfort, my sense of security, but they couldn't take my grandfather's memories. They couldn't take away the one thing that kept me going, the belief that, deep down, I was worth more than they ever recognized in me. In the cold, lonely darkness of the basement, that was the only source of warmth I had. After spending a couple of years enduring life in the basement, I came to realize that staying in a house where I was never wanted, pretending to be part of a family that didn't care, wasn't an option any longer. I knew I had to leave, to create a life on my own terms, far from the toxic environment that had always held me back. So, at 17, I made up my mind. I was going to find a job and finally break free. I began looking around town, asking at various shops, diners, anywhere that would hire someone with no experience but plenty of determination. One day, I walked into a small auto repair shop on the edge of town. It was an unpretentious place with a modest sign that read, "Tom's Auto Repair," but it smelled of oil and metal, and there was something about it that felt real. That's where I met Tom, the owner, a middle-aged man with a lean frame, a rough voice, and permanent grease stains on his hands. He gave me a skeptical look when I asked if they were hiring. "You know anything about cars, kid?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "No," I admitted, "but I'm willing to learn. I'll work hard, whatever you need. I just need a chance." He studied me for a moment, and I could see him thinking. After what seemed like forever, he nodded, almost reluctantly. "All right, I'll give you a shot. Could use an extra hand around here. Doesn't pay much, but it's honest work." The job was tough, but I threw myself into it with all I had. Tom turned out to be more than just a boss. He became a mentor. He taught me more than just how to fix cars. He showed me how to work with my hands, solve problems, and most importantly, believe in myself. He was tough, but fair, and he treated me with a respect I hadn't known before. A few weeks later, I mentioned to Tom that I was still living at home, or rather, in the basement. He didn't say much at first, just nodded thoughtfully. The next day, he pulled me aside. "Got a spare room in the back," he said, scratching his chin. "It's nothing fancy, but it has a bed and a door that locks. You're welcome to it if you want. Might be better than that basement you've been stuck in." I was taken aback. I hadn't expected such kindness, and for a moment, I wasn't sure how to respond. "Are you sure? I don't want to be a burden," I said. He waved his hand dismissively. "Kid, I wouldn't offer if I didn't mean it. Besides, it's good to have someone around to help out. You need a place, and I could use the company. So, what do you say?" I accepted, and just like that, my life began to change. I moved into the small room at the back of the shop, and for the first time in years, I felt free. It was a humble space, bare walls, a simple bed, a small dresser, but it was mine, and that made all the difference. I was no longer at the mercy of my family. I had a place to call my own, a roof over my head that wasn't tied to their neglect or indifference. I worked hard at the shop, learning everything I could from Tom. He was patient, teaching me not just the mechanics of cars, but also how to run a business, handle customers, and take pride in a job well done. He gave me a sense of purpose, something to strive for, and I threw myself into the work, determined to prove I could make something of my life. I saved every penny I earned, living frugally and setting aside as much as I could. It wasn't easy, and there were times I was tempted to splurge on things I'd always wanted, but never had. But I had a goal, a vision of a future where I could stand on my own, free from my family and their empty promises. After 3 years of hard work and saving, I managed to put aside $20,000. I had been careful, only spending what I needed, living in that small room at the shop, and gradually building up a decent nest egg. I began looking at properties, dreaming of a place I could truly call my own. A home I built with my own 2 hands. I found a modest house on the outskirts of town, a fixer-upper that had seen better days but had potential. The asking price was $660,000, and while I didn't have enough to buy it outright, I had saved enough for a solid down payment. I secured a small loan, and with Tom's help and encouragement, I bought the house. It took 3 years of hard work, sweat, and sacrifice, but I finally had a place of my own. Renovating the house was a labor of love. I spent my evenings and weekends fixing it up, repairing the roof, painting the walls, putting down new flooring. It was hard work, but every nail I hammered, every wall I painted, brought me one step closer to building the life I'd always dreamed of. It was mine, truly mine, and for the first time, I felt in control of my own destiny. Life was good. I had my independence, a job I loved, and a home that was entirely mine. I felt proud and accomplished, as if I had finally broken free from the shadows of my past. But just when I thought I had left that life behind, my family reappeared. It started with a call from my mother. She had heard about the house and my success, and suddenly she seemed full of concern, as if she'd always been there for me. She asked about the house and my work, her voice bright with false cheer, but I could sense the real reason underneath it all. They wanted back in. They wanted a share of what I had built. A few days later, they showed up uninvited, standing on my doorstep with Lily in tow. I opened the door, surprised to see them. For a moment, I just stood there, unsure of how to react. "Ethan," my mother said, stepping forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We heard you've done so well for yourself. You've got this beautiful house now, and we thought it might be nice if we could all be together again." I immediately understood what she was asking, even though she didn't directly say it. They wanted to move in, to take advantage of the life I had created, as though they had always been part of it, as if they had contributed to my success. I looked at them, at Lily standing there with her familiar smirk, and a rush of anger hit me. A reminder of everything they had done to me, everything they had taken away. "I don't think so," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I built this on my own. I worked hard for it, and I'm not about to let you waltz back into my life now that it's convenient for you." My father's face turned bright red, a flash of anger in his eyes. "We're family," he said, as though that word could erase all the years of neglect. All the nights I spent alone in the basement, all the times they had chosen Lily over me. "You can't just turn us away." "I can, and I am," I replied, crossing my arms. "You didn't care about me then, and you don't care about me now. You only care about what you can get from me. Well, I'm done. I don't need you, and I don't owe you anything." My mother tried to protest, tried to guilt me, reminding me of all the supposed things they had done for me. But her words felt hollow, empty echoes of a past I had long since left behind. I had built this life without them, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me. They left, their faces a mix of anger and disbelief. As I watched them drive away, I felt an unexpected sense of relief, a weight lifting from my shoulders. I had finally stood up for myself, finally broken free from the last ties that had bound me to that toxic family. I was my own person, independent and self-sufficient, and I had no intention of going back. As I closed the door and took in the sight of my little house, I felt a surge of pride. It was a reminder of everything I had accomplished, everything I had built from scratch. This was my life, my success, and I had earned it on my own terms. I didn't need them, and I never had. I had a home, a job, and a future that were mine and mine alone. For the first time, I felt truly free. It was almost by accident that I discovered what my parents had done. One afternoon, while sorting through some old boxes in my basement, I came across a file folder with my grandfather's handwriting on it. It was dusty and worn, and I hadn't seen it since before he passed away. I opened it, and what I found inside left me both shocked and furious. The folder contained documents related to an inheritance he had set aside for me, something I had never known about until that moment. As I sifted through the papers, I began to understand what he had left for me. A substantial sum of money meant to help me build my future. I couldn't believe it. My grandfather had left me a financial cushion, something to help me get started in life, to give me a solid foundation. But I had never seen a cent of it. I took the documents to Mr. Grant, my lawyer, the same man who had helped me deal with my family's earlier attempt to ruin my business. He went over the paperwork, his expression darkening as he examined the details. "This is serious, Ethan," he said, looking up from the papers. "It seems your parents illegally accessed this inheritance and diverted the funds to accounts in your sister's name. They had no right to that money. It was yours, and they've misused it." I sat there in stunned silence, anger and betrayal building inside me. I couldn't believe they had gone that far, that they had stooped so low as to steal from me, to take what my grandfather had left for me, and give it to Lily. It felt like a punch to the gut, a painful reminder of every time they had chosen her over me, every time they made it clear that I was nothing but an inconvenience to them. "What can I do about it?" I asked, my voice shaking with rage. Mr. Grant leaned back, his eyes narrowing as he considered my options. "You can take them to court. This is a clear case of fraud, and with these documents, we have more than enough evidence to build a strong case. You have every right to claim what was left to you, and they should be held accountable for what they've done." It didn't take me long to make my decision. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. They had stolen from me, taken what was mine, and used it to benefit Lily, just like they always had. But this time, they weren't going to walk away without facing the consequences. I was done being the silent victim, done letting them walk all over me as if I didn't matter. I was going to fight, and I was going to win. The legal battle was grueling, with court dates, depositions, and endless rounds of paperwork. My parents fought back, of course, denying everything and trying to paint themselves as innocent victims. They claimed they had only done what was best for the family, that they had used the money for Lily because she needed it more than I did. It was the same excuse. I had heard the same excuse all my life, the one they always used whenever they prioritized her needs over mine. But this time, it wasn't enough. Mr. Grant was relentless, dismantling their defense piece by piece, exposing their lies and deceit for everyone to see. The evidence was undeniable, and as the trial continued, I could see the growing fear in their eyes. They knew they were losing, and they understood there was nothing they could do to stop it. When the verdict was delivered, I felt a sense of vindication like I had never experienced before. The judge ruled in my favor, confirming that my parents had indeed committed fraud and unlawfully taken my inheritance. They were ordered to pay restitution, compensating me not only for the money they had stolen, but also for the emotional harm they had caused. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had truly won. I had reclaimed something they had no right to take, and I had forced them to face the consequences of their actions. After the trial, I experienced a sense of closure I hadn't expected. Winning the case wasn't just about the financial compensation. It was about finally standing up for myself, refusing to remain their victim any longer. I had always felt powerless, as if I was at their mercy, but now I knew that wasn't the case. I had a voice, and I had the strength to use it. With the restitution I received, I was able to secure my future and build a life that was entirely my own, free from their influence and toxicity. I severed all ties with them, no longer allowing them any control over me. They had repeatedly shown that they didn't care about me, that they had never valued me, and I was done trying to earn a place in a family that had never wanted me. Letting go of the idea of family and cutting off the ties that had bound me to them for so long wasn't easy, but I knew it was the only way forward. It was the only way to find peace and create a life on my own terms. I came to understand that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by love, respect, and the people who stand by you when it truly matters. My grandfather had taught me that. He was the only person who had ever made me feel truly valued. Now I knew I could honor him by living a life of freedom that was entirely my own. I continued to grow my business, expanding my knowledge and watching it thrive. I made new friends, people who became like family to me, who supported me and believed in me in ways my biological family never had. I found a sense of belonging and peace I had never known as a child. And through it all, I held on to the lessons my grandfather had taught me, the love he gave, the belief he instilled in me. I could see how far I had come and how much I had grown. I knew I had made the right choice in breaking free from the toxic family, from their lies and betrayals. I had built a life that was entirely mine. I had found my strength and resilience, and I was ready to face whatever came next. I was finally free, finally at peace, and I knew I had a future filled with endless possibilities, one that I could shape as I wished. I realized that family is not always about who you're related to, but about the people who care for you, respect you, and stand by you when it matters. I had found my family in the friends I had made and in the life I had created. I knew my grandfather would be proud. I had taken back what was mine, defended my right to live life on my own terms, and I was now ready to embrace the future ahead of me, free from the past, free from the pain. I was finally ready to live. If you like this story, subscribe now and listen to new stories every day. Let us know what you liked most in the comments. Lily, on the other hand, was cherished. She was the child they hoped for, anticipated, and celebrated. I remember overhearing their conversations through thin walls when I was young. They spoke as if they didn't care who might hear. "She's perfect," my mom would say, and my dad would always agree enthusiastically. "She's exactly what we wanted." They didn't care that I was just a room away, listening. Lily was the golden child, the center of their world.